world. Here with me today is a super seasoned B2B marketing leader with a passion for all things digital marketing and driving unimaginable demand at high growth SaaS companies. Her mix of creativity and innovation, coupled with her analytic ability, is unmatched, and it shows in the success of her extremely high-performing teams, where new ideas are not only welcomed, but encouraged. Please welcome today, Auseh Britt, Vice President of Growth Marketing at Terminus. Auseh, are you ready to get radically transparent with me?
I'm ready, Jen.
Fantastic. So listen, we get pretty transparent on the show. It's an Oktopost core value, but I'm going to throw you an easy one, hopefully. Maybe not all journeys are easy, but I was really curious just looking at your background, knowing from the brief conversations that we've had before the show, and I'm super curious. Would you be able to give us a brief look at your professional journey and how you actually found yourself at Terminus today?
Yeah, sure. So I have held a number of different positions at different size companies, different industries in the marketing realm. I was a career changer, so I'm going to kind of probably start with my post MBA kind of career path, just to kind of just shorten the story a little bit. But I started out in loyalty marketing with Intercontinental Hotels Group, which is a large multinational hotel company. And I was starting out in strategic alliances, which was kind of a neat role that kind of spanned loyalty marketing along with more of a business development and partnership side. So it allowed me really to build those partnerships with different types of companies and then kind of leverage them to promote the Intercontinental Hotels brands and drive room nights and stuff with the hotels. After that, I relocated to the West Coast. My husband got a job opportunity in California. So that caused me to kind of leave IHG. And while there, I actually had a couple of different roles. The first one with a company called Teleflora. And at Teleflora, it's kind of like an FTD competitor of theirs. And that's where I really kind of, I'd say, sharpened my more direct marketing chops and really just doing very targeted campaigns with different segments. I produced my first print catalog, if you can remember those, if anybody produces those anymore. But because Teleflora is big on sends and gifting, the holidays are huge. And so we actually went old school and decided, let's test like an old school catalog and send to people and see if that works. And you know what? It did. So we started producing those a couple times a year for Mother's Day and then the Christmas holiday. And then from there, I moved on to a company called business.com. And that's where I kind of started more in the internet tech side industry. And I managed I was the head of marketing there at business.com with online marketing operations, things like that. So at business.com, I was there for a few years and then relocated to the East Coast, another move predicated by personal reasons. And I was at Bloomberg. And so at Bloomberg, I ran, so now I'm into more information services, finance, tech. Bloomberg is heavy tech. And managed all the online marketing for a division of theirs, part of Bloomberg Industry Group. And from there, I did a stint at a company called QuestX. And then I went to Logi Analytics. And at Logi Analytics, it's an embedded business intelligence company. So SaaS, high growth company, and focused on demand generation and led their marketing team there. And then that led me to Terminus. So I don't know if that was as brief of a path as you were hoping for, but what led me there is while I was at Logi Analytics, we were launching our first account-based marketing program.
Okay.
So by doing that, we were taking a look at vendors, and Terminus was at the top of our list in terms of who we wanted to work with. And so we signed on as a customer with Terminus. And then about a year later, we also signed on with a company called Sixter that does email signature marketing. And about a year and a half ago, Terminus actually ended up purchasing Sixter. So now Sixter is part of the Terminus family. But that is what kind of led me to it. So when I saw an opportunity to join Terminus and leading their growth marketing, I kind of jumped all over it because I was a big believer in the product the whole go-to-market strategy of ABM. I'm a firm believer in that as well. So because I was already a customer of the product, I had firsthand knowledge of, the benefits that it could bring. So I ended up joining Terminus about a year ago.
I love it. You love the technology so much you had to join. I don't think there's any
That's right.
story than that. Listen, what I love about your journey, it's so diverse, right? And you kind of hit all of these different, right? Loyal marketing and catalog work. There's all of the
Damn it.
right? It's so diverse. And what will the next question I'm going to ask, I've asked so many different marketers, and I think with your background, I'm so curious to know what you're going to answer to this because I feel you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, and it's not just been digital. It's been all over the marketing arena. But I'm curious to know, in your career today, you've been 1 year at Terminus. What is currently keeping you up at night professionally?
Yeah, it's I think the uncertainty that we're kind of still facing in the market with this pandemic, we thought we had kind of, gotten over the hump when the vaccines came out. And we are starting to get back to events in a live in-person format. And I think just not knowing now with this Delta variant coming in, what's kind of concerning me is what does that mean? And we're going to be actually attending our first in-person event next week at B2B SMX in Boston. And I think that's going to be a great litmus test of seeing how comfortable people are at attending these things right now. Because live events used to be a pretty important part of our demand gen awareness, go-to-market plan. And then when all that kind of shut down, I mean, a lot of companies were in this boat, right? They had to quickly pivot into finding something else to help build, pipeline. And because we are very much a multi-channel type of approach company, heavy into ABM, we were able to pivot quickly and kind of reinvest our dollars into those other areas. I still think events still played a pretty important role in our marketing strategy. So I think the thing that's kind of concerning me is now with all the stuff going on is just maybe some of the uncertainty that's going to be there. So we're going to try it in a measured fashion, but I think we also need to have contingency plans in place that if this thing, gets, worse, hopefully it doesn't, but then what does that mean? And where do we turn from there, knowing that it might be another 6 months, to a year until stuff really fully comes back. Yep. So I think that's kind of got me a little concerned, just also because of how recent it is. The fact that we're going to be there next week, that's keeping me up right now is, but there's only so much you can control. So I also have that type of philosophy, is not to get too hung up and worried on stuff that you can't control. I think you just have to make sure you have contingency plans and what the potential risks are.
Absolutely. And this actually leads me nicely into my next question because, what I've been reading, and you can definitely keep me honest. I feel this is, this is totally in your camp of marketing. But I've been reading a lot of kind of, is field marketing dead? And especially when it comes to ABM, I've seen kind of these voices on LinkedIn, I'll call them, or maybe micro influencers suggesting that perhaps ABM is going to replace field marketing. And then what do you do with your field marketers who are trained in the field, and how do you transition them? So I want to pose the question and hear from you. Is field marketing dead?
I don't think so. I don't think it is at all. And if anything, it's becoming more important in an ABM environment, and especially for those strategic accounts. So we actually, something I've been working on since I joined Terminus is really building out what we're calling our ABM Center of Excellence, and building out a team that is dedicated to account-based marketing. And we have them organized by different segments. So we have one person who is focused on new logo acquisition, but more of that programmatic and one-to-many, one-to-few type of programs. We have another person who's also focused on new logo acquisition, but on the strategic side. And then another one, ABM manager, who's focused just on customer expansion. But where field marketing, I think, is important is that person that we have, that manager who's focused on the strategic accounts. He is so tightly aligned with the AEs that he's supporting. And they have like 5 big bet accounts each. And he is an ABM manager, but in a way, like with the field marketing, he's also working closely with them in terms of things that are happening in their region, making sure that when they do have those meetings, and hopefully in person soon, that it's part of the whole experience of what do those meetings kind of, look like. Because strategic accounts are high dollar, but they're longer sales cycles. They're, larger buying committees and things like that. So, he gets involved also, I think, from a field marketing kind of perspective too. But no, I think field marketing is just, it's still important, and you still need to kind of drive those relationships in market. Not always on a regional, or not, sorry, a national kind of like platform, but there's certain nuances and stuff that in region that you need to do. And you can do targeting within regions too, with all the targeting, capabilities that we have nowadays, like with, with paid search, and also like some of the, audio and OTT streaming and stuff. You can really get down to certain geos and things like that. So we definitely have certain markets that are the most important to us, where we see our biggest concentration of customers and prospects. And we want to make sure like we're getting out there, in the field one way or another. Hopefully it's going to be in person, but if not, we can still do stuff digitally to support, specific regions and specific like people that are in the field.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. And I'm sure any field marketer listening in today is also really glad to hear you say that, because there's just so many blogs out there and analysis out there that's talking about field marketing being dead. So I'm really happy to hear you saying that you don't think it's dead, and that, there's definitely a way to revitalize it after, all of the craziness that was 2020 and with the new Delta variant. So I'm happy to hear your optimism. I want to touch, we've been kind of throwing around the term ABM a few questions now. And I know account-based marketing isn't a new concept in B2B, and we've definitely been hearing it pop up more and more over the year of 2020, with many, I would say, of us getting more niche in our marketing and kind of focusing in and zooming in on those target accounts. And today, right, B2B marketers, at the end of the day, we're still responsible for lead volume, right? No pressure, no pressure at all.
Yeah.
Right. It's on our shoulders to make sure that there's a steady flow of leads into the funnel. So while ABM is a fantastic answer, I think, for gaining those high quality leads, do you feel it's enough to replace the other channels we've lost, such as events or roundtables, or for the time being, is there another channel besides ABM, or another strategy rather, that we could also be leaning on?
Yeah. So I think ABM is important. And I think from an efficiency, both from resource and dollars, I think it's been proven that it's definitely the way to go to really focus on those accounts that you care about. And I think one of the benefits too is that it really requires tight sales and marketing alignment, which I think is crucial in any kind of B2B type of environment. Is it's about the accounts that you want to get into, and not necessarily about the individuals. So I think that is part of the mind shift too, is leads are so contact based. So people just see them as these individuals that are doing these individual activities versus taking an account kind of perspective. So, we have a heavy ABM program. Like I mentioned, we have 3 dedicated people that are focused on ABM, and it is, core to our business and our marketing. But that doesn't mean that we're also not doing demand programs. We're still out there doing advertising and dedicated email sends, and we're doing webinars and things like that, because you still need to build awareness. You still need to build engagement. Everybody wants to drive inbound quality traffic to their site and convert them. But I think the difference is focusing really on the accounts and not necessarily the individual leads. And that's kind of the approach that we take, is making sure that we're attracting the right accounts. And even though you may get an individual that comes and requests a demo, after that, it's like, okay, but who else is maybe in the buying committee? Who else do we kind of need to kind of get involved in this process? And it's not just that one person. So I think part of it is this mind shift of moving more from a leads to an account kind of approach. But that doesn't mean it's 100% ABM all the time. I think so for some companies, 100% ABM works. If you have a very specific product that feeds into a very specific like target audience, then you know who you want, you know who buys from you. And there's certain industries that are definitely like that, especially manufacturing,
Yeah.
that they have a top, 200 accounts list, and that's who they focus on. Or if customer expansion is the core to your revenue. And you have some companies like that too, that 80-90% of their revenue comes from the current customer base. That ABM is definitely, you can rely on that 100%. But for some of us that have like this straddle, it's, you can't stop doing your demand programs, because especially if you have a larger addressable market, you're not going to be able to cover everybody through ABM, because the point of ABM is focusing on the top accounts and really kind of getting into them with a multi-channel, multi-threaded approach. So I think there's a place for both. I think the mind shift, if you can make it within your company, is to move away from that individual contact lead into more of an account. Like, is this a good account? And yes, we're getting some engagement from that account from an inbound. How do we kind of get more people engaged so we can convert them?
I like that. At Octopost, we talk a lot about mindset, skill set, and tool set in various kind of conversations. And I think what I love how you're calling out the mindset, right? You can use whatever tool set, have a great skill set, but if you don't have the right mindset, you're not going anywhere. And I think we've learned that this past year and beyond. But I think it's so important to be putting that into practice. And, something that I think about from that and kind of taking that question to the next level. So, you mentioned that next week you're heading to Boston, and hopefully it will be a great event and still have some great ROI off of events. But as we all know, listening in, you have this Delta variant. We don't know where the world is going to stand in the next, month, 5 months to a year. And I would love to hear kind of, as VP marketing of growth marketing, and kind of looking at your vision, if you're looking out, how are you planning, for the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, in terms of creating or, building some sort of agenda for live events versus virtual events? And how are you playing those deck of cards?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, we're having a mix. So I'll say there's definitely a mix between doing your traditional webinars, virtual events, and then live events. So we are dipping our toe in the water with the live events coming this fall, and have signed up for some. And we'll see how that, plays out. We're eager to get out there and meet with our prospects and customers. I think there's definitely appetite for it, but we have to do it obviously in the safe way. But I think with the virtual events, if anything that the pandemic showed us was there's a market for virtual events. Like, when you see some of the numbers of people who attend and were willing to kind of participate in virtual events, I think it surprised a lot of people.
Yeah.
It does have some advantages in terms of, it breaks down, barriers of access. Even, you have wider time zones, people don't have to travel, they're more apt to sign up. But I think the also thing we learned is, as time went on, some of the engagement also started to kind of decline, where people would pop in, they pop out. The Q&As weren't quite as robust, is what I found, because I've been on a few virtual events and speaking sessions. Are people really are they listening? Are they like engaged?
We are seeing kind of the same thing. We actually, so we started putting games in our webinars to keep people engaged throughout, but similar to what you're saying. And we've actually, before the pandemic, we never had like this on demand, if you will, kind of version of what we did. We kind of had everything unlisted, or, it was gated. And now we just have kind of this whole on demand section of, content and webinars and driving, brand awareness. And I'm curious to know, have you seen that same kind of, in the beginning of the pandemic, I remember we did some webinars and there was like 500 plus registrants. We're like, wow, we've broken the webinar cold. Our code. And then as it kind of dwindled, but we've seen our on demand go up. Are you guys finding the same thing at Terminus, or is it's still balanced?
Yeah, I say it's it's still balanced, but we're definitely seeing our people who are registering for our webinars increase, like over the past year, that people are getting more comfortable with just, I think, consuming content in that way. The other thing we did is we held our own virtual event in May, that we did it in conjunction with Convince and Convert, Jay Bear's organization.
Yeah. Wow.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun, but we knew if we were going to do it, it had to be different. Like it had to be a topic that was different. And it was all about breaking things, like kind of break out of the mold of your traditional marketing, think differently. And it was a half day event. We had a bunch of different marketing leaders and influencers that participated, but each segment was only about 8 minutes long.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was short, not like you're sitting through a 20, 30 minute, webinar, no
Yeah.
PowerPoint presentation. So it was super dynamic, short sessions, topics. And we gamified it a bit, like you said, where the viewers could also vote on which ones were their favorite.
Oh,
And
wow.
whichever one was their favorite session, we made a donation to their charitable cause. So each speaker had a charity that they had selected and that they
Wow.
would say, this, I'm representing this charity, this is why. So you would vote, and then whoever had the most votes, we donated, I think it was like $10,000 to that charity.
That's amazing.
So
Do you have any other virtual events in similar format coming up that we could register for? That sounds
yeah, I don't think we have any coming up like right now, but it was such a big hit and it kind of surpassed like our goal that we set for registrations. But the engagement was great because people were talking on there. And I think the fact that the content was different, it was highly produced. I was so impressed with like the video. I think that's also changed, like the quality of video production that people are putting into these things, with the graphics and sound effects, like all this kind of stuff. It was highly produced for each of the speakers. And the fact that it was eight, I mean, who doesn't have 8 minutes like to listen to one? Like you don't have to stay for all, but you could watch some.
And I love that it's 8 minutes. It has like right, it's like not 10 minutes because 10 minutes is a little too long, and it's not 5 minutes because that's too short. Like 8 minutes seems perfect.
Right, right. So I think virtual events in that respect, if you do them a little bit differently, then I think you'll see people attend, and there's an appetite, for that. So moving forward, I think there's a place for both virtual and live events. But I think once it's safe to go back, I think I just see it in personal travel. I don't know if you've done any personal travel, but I mean, places are packed right now. Like there is definitely this pent up like demand for people to kind of get out.
Yeah.
Now business, we'll have to see how that is from a business perspective, if they're willing to do that or their companies are willing to send them or not. I think we'll see over the next few months.
Yeah. We'll definitely have an
But
eye
once
on
that's, yeah. But I think there's a place for both moving forward.
I love your idea about the virtual event. And I would love to keep asking you and picking your brain for eternity. I think you're brilliant. For
Oh,
the sake of the podcast, I have two more questions for you. So, you mentioned with Jay Bauer, and I know your event had influencers, so that leads me to believe that you're keeping up with influencers in the field. And I'd love to know, like, as a marketer, as a very seasoned B2B marketer, who are you subscribed to? Where do you stay updated in our industry? Demand gen, growth marketing. Are there any books that you're reading that you think anyone in our field should definitely put on their number one, read this book right now list?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I get my information from multiple, sources. I have some that are more like a general business or marketing, like, I subscribe to the digital edition of the Wall Street Journal and look at that stuff for general business stuff on their marketing section. Also, Forbes CMO newsletter is a good one too, that I subscribe to. Also, eMarketer is really great for data and looking at trends that are happening. And I often look at that, especially for like digital channels and things like that, of how which digital channels, are spiking or declining, that people are seeing new successes with. Um, and then also Marketing Brew is another
Oh,
one.
what's
I don't know if
marketing
you've heard
brew?
of the Marketing Brew
Is it the
newsletter.
coffee? What is that? Coffee morning brew? Is it the same people that do
Yes.
morning
So
brew?
it's the same people that bring Morning Brew. They do a marketing version that's like 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Love their
And I like those
style.
because it's kind of like the hustle or the skim, it has like that personality, first person kind of point of view. So it's kind of refreshing to read, but they do a marketing version called Marketing Brew. So subscribe to that one.
I'm gonna
as well.
I
But
like
I
that
gotta say,
style.
the place where I'm actually getting a lot of benefit from are in a lot of these communities that have kind of been formed.
Like social
There's one
communities?
called, yeah, there are organizations, some you have to pay for, some you don't. But like Women in Revenue
Oh,
is
okay.
one.
So
So
who do we
I
know?
would
We
definitely
know
like,
Hannah Jacover. She was a
uh-huh.
podcast guest of ours, and she was talking about that community as well.
Yeah, so it's all, it's women that are in any kind of revenue function. So you have people from marketing, of course, sales, revenue operations. So that's a great community, a Slack community. I recently joined Pavilion, which was formerly Revenue Collective.
Okay.
Um, and what I like about those communities is it's peers. You kind of feel like it's in a safe environment. People go there a lot for just advice and guidance and recommendations, like for vendors. I know oftentimes, like, you have a project that starts and you just need help in a certain area. It's like, hey, does
We
anybody
all.
have any recommendations for, yeah, who you've worked with in the past? Also marketing technology, of stuff that you want to check out. And what I really like about it is, there's a lot of give and take and there's a lot of support. And so the only way those communities work is if people are willing to share as much as they ask. And I find that those have been really good resources for me whenever I just want it, like a sounding board or want to get some information. And they also share a lot of templates too. Like if there's something that you're trying to do from a project standpoint, and you're like, has anybody ever created all that? And they're just like, yeah, here. And it just saves, like, there you
Hours.
go.
It
Saved.
can
Yeah.
take hours
Yeah.
to get
Because
you
someone
back into your
has
life.
already done it and it's already worked for them. So I'm finding a lot of help, or just being in these,
Love it.
different communities.
I love that. I really do. And I think I couldn't agree with you more. What I find interesting, and I've had some conversations about this, is that a lot of professionals that I've been speaking with, interviewing, they've shared that, LinkedIn's a great place to be a thought leader, to share information. And I know that at one point, right, there were LinkedIn groups, and I think LinkedIn had tried very hard to build those communities. But what I found
Yeah.
interesting is some people were giving me feedback that they didn't feel that they could be authentically themselves on LinkedIn because that was their professional persona. That's where they go
Mhm.
to find a job, or that's, they want to be perceived as professional or intelligent, or whatever the professional kind of persona they're building, which I agree with. But they were afraid almost to ask those types of questions that you're finding much more comfort asking in those communities. Like asking for a template, right? You wouldn't necessarily crowdsource on your LinkedIn, hey, does
Mhm.
anybody have a template? But perhaps you are indeed looking for that. And so I think it's really interesting how on LinkedIn, even though it's designed to be this community network, professional network where people to come together, I still think that there's kind of this stigma that, wait, LinkedIn is a little bit more for job searching and we have a persona to uphold, and the community is really
Yeah.
the place that you can just let loose, if you will, and ask kind of those radically transparent questions or get insight without feeling judged or without feeling like you're being under a microscope or your CEO is going to see, right? And I appreciate those communities.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because it's more of a safer place, I think, like you said, where people are not, afraid of maybe showing some vulnerability. Like, yeah, I run this now, but I haven't done it before. So does anybody have like any advice for me? And you see
Exactly.
things like that, right? And it's like, okay, we all know that we have our own strengths and weaknesses. So I think just having that self-awareness of this may be an area where I could use some of my peers' advice who may have that experience, that these communities, because they're more private and there's certain channels that, and some are only for certain, groups of
People.
people. Yeah, it's a safer environment that I think you can show some of that
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability, but then it's just more authentic, and it becomes valuable
A
to
hundred
people who are
percent agree.
participating.
This actually leads nicely into the last question that I have for you. So, failure, right? It's an inevitable part of success. We've all been there. We've all, poured our blood, sweat, and tears into perhaps a campaign or a program and watched it fall on its face, or perhaps, created something that never saw the light of day. And I was wondering if you might be able to share a time in your career when you thought you had failed in the moment, but in actuality, it actually helped you get where you are today and it wasn't a failure at all, or a lesson that you've learned from it.
Yeah, I'm probably going to take this back again to account-based marketing because I think that was a good one. So when I was with Lodging Analytics and we kicked off our first, our account-based marketing kind of go-to-market strategy, we put a lot of time and effort into it, and we were working closely with sales, and our account development reps reported into sales at the time. So you have this shift often, especially in SaaS companies, where that business development, sales development team, like 50% of the time they report to sales, 50% to marketing. But here we were working with, they were in sales, and we had a great playbook and all this kind of stuff. But as we kind of kicked it off and we thought we had this really great alignment, and we did for a while until we finally started realizing that those ADRs that were supposed to be focused like on these accounts were starting to kind of get pulled in other directions of this and of that. And it's like, okay, things are starting to kind of unravel a little bit in terms of the ABM program, that maybe we don't have the alignment that we need. And then you have some folks from the sales leadership side who are still like, yeah, this is great, but to your point, where are our leads? Where are the leads? Like, we need so many more leads. And it's like, wait a minute, we thought we were, aligned on we're doing the ABM. And so anyway, that program ended up kind of like fizzling out for that reason and a few others. But that was a lesson learned, I think, from my end, is when we're embarking on something like that, when it's a shift in terms of like change management, and it can't just be marketing doing it. It truly is a marketing and sales partnership and alignment. That marketing could be doing all of the targeting and doing all the multi-channel marketing to these accounts to get them engaged. If sales isn't kind of aligned to following up and making sure they're looking for those signals on those accounts, that are showing those intent and actually pursuing them with very, very specific messaging that we've put together, like things like that, then it all can kind of fall apart. And so I think that was my big lesson learned, is just really the importance of that sales and marketing alignment when it comes to ABM. Like you really have to have that, I think, for it to be successful. So that's definitely was a lesson learned on my end.
I like that lesson only because there's such a stigma with, sales and marketing and the war between us. And I think ABM truly is the strategy that brings everybody together. But it's like, is it an art or science? How do you do it? And how do you roll it out? Because both teams do have, even though everybody's striving towards revenue, we all have kind of a different method to our madness to getting there. And I think it's so important to be aligned. And I know for ABM, it takes a lot of alignment. Why does sales have to do X? Why is marketing doing Y? And really making sure everybody is clear on why everything is happening. So Auseh, thank you so much for joining me today, for getting radically transparent. For anyone listening who might want to learn more about Terminus, or might want to connect with you, where's the best place to continue the conversation?
Well, you can send me a message on LinkedIn, or I'm happy to kind of, share my email address or something like that. I don't know what the best way to do that through the program is, but I'm happy to kind of chat with anybody who just wants to talk marketing or B2B marketing or even ABM to that effect. I'm happy to do so.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And good luck at the event next week.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Radically Transparent podcast, brought to you by Oktopost, the only social media management and employee advocacy platform architected for B2B. I'm Jennifer Gutman, your host and director of social strategy here at Oktopost. And if you love today's show, we'd love if you subscribe, rate, and give a raving review wherever you get your podcasts. For more discussion on B2B social media marketing, be sure to follow Oktopost on LinkedIn. And of course, to gain access to all our free social media marketing and employee advocacy resources, head on over to our website, www.oktopost.com. Until next time.